What's up, everybody? This is your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga, here to bring you another video with no frills, just the analysis. And today I'm going to be bringing you the Season 1, Episode 3 review of The Legend of Korra entitled The Revelation. And boy, what a revelation it was. But first, let me just say this. My excitement for The Legend of Korra has really been increasing. And this is somewhat unusual for me because I don't watch a lot of TV. In fact, like I said numerous times before, I don't even have a television in my dorm room. So I most of the time I download all of my episodes. But I tend to download my episodes in bulk so I get a chance to, binge watch a series. So it's really rare for me to, experience a point in the week where, I'm thinking about an episode that's coming on a particular day of the week. You know what I'm saying? How it's that the it may be Wednesday or Thursday, and all of a sudden you're thinking about the Legend of Korra, and I'm starting to fiend for this show, and in that way, so my level of excitement has really been increasing for the Legend of Korra. Also, I watched Melinda Pendulum's video on the Legend of Korra that she put up, I don't know, a couple of days ago, and she has some very good points, and she really got me thinking about Amon. And so I really wanted to dedicate the bulk of this episode review to analyzing and examining Amon. And I think that's very apt because this episode, the revelation was was pretty much all about Amon. So first I'm going to give my summary, and then I'm going to give an analysis of this episode, and in particular Amon. So this episode review might be a little bit longish because of my analysis of Amon. All right. So we learned that since the Fire Ferrets won their last match, I believe, or maybe it happened in the interim between episode 2 or 3. But in any event, the Fire Ferrets have now been able to qualify for the championship tournament in their pro bending sport. However, there's a little catch to this. So there's good news and bad news. The bad news is that they need 30,000 yuans, or, that's the currency of the Avatar world. So they need 30,000 yuans to, put up so that they can be, admitted into the tournament. And obviously they don't have that kind of money. So basically what happens, and this is what starts, all of the misadventures of this episode. Basically what happens is Bo Lin, who at some point in the past, I think maybe worked for the mafia, he decides to go back to work for the mafia as muscle to be able to get the 30,000 yuan so he can pay the entry fee into the championship tournament. And so he just goes missing, and Paco doesn't, oh no, not Paco, Mako, I believe is his name. Not Paco, Mako. So Mako, searches out Korra, and they go, looking for him. And lo and behold, Bolin finds himself being kidnapped by the Equalists. So basically what happened is the Equalists, Bolin decided to do a job for the Triple Threat Triads. And at some point he went back to their hideout or their headquarters. However, their headquarters, the Triple Threat Triads headquarters, got attacked by the Equalists, and the Equalists came there and they kidnapped, all of the benders there, and took them back to their own, Equalist, hideout or headquarters or whatever the case may be. However, Mako and Korra get there just in time to see Bo Lin being, tied up and thrown in the back of the truck. So they obviously, a chase scene ensues, and it was a very, very nice chase scene on the motorcycles. And then after that, a fight ensues, and the fight was, that was a sort of mini revelation. If there was a big revelation in this episode, this fight between Korra and the Equalists was a mini revelation, and here's why. First of all, the fight scene was absolutely beautiful. Again, the animation is and the aesthetics is just absolutely breathtaking. So this fight happens, at nighttime, and Korra is using, fire bending. So there's a nice little play of, dark and light in the midst of, this nighttime fight with Korra using air bending. And also the city as a backdrop just looked, very, very nice. So it was a, very, very nice cityscape that sort of framed this fight between Korra and the Equalists. But the mini revelation is this. Korra got her ass whooped. She got her ass whooped. I mean, just No, there's just no other way to say it. And what made it so bad is there was only two. She only had to fight two equalists, and they just completely overpowered her. And to say the least, this was just extremely surprising. I could not have foreseen that she would have such a problem defeating the equalists, and there was, only two of them. So at this point in the series, we already know that this is not going to be a cakewalk. Even though Korra is the avatar and she can bend all four elements and she's an extremely formidable warrior, if she's getting beat up by only two equalists, then she's going to have some serious problems. She's going to have some very serious problems. And I just expected Korra to be stronger. And later on I'll give my analysis or breakdown of this fight. Actually, I might do that depending on what the time's looking like. I might not. But anyway, she gets beat up by the equalists there, and they're able to escape with Bolin. So basically what happens is Mako and Korra have to, find the equalist headquarters or hideout so that they can go there and, save Bolin. And whoa, shit. This is the major revelation that we find out in this week's episode. Apparently, Amon has the ability to permanently take away someone's ability to bend. Wow. Wow. So first of all, we've already seen that Korra has a difficult time fighting the equalists. I mean, she's only fighting two of them, and they were able to get a significant series of hits where they were able to temporarily take away her ability to bend. So imagine what would happen if she found herself in a fight with Amon, who has the ability to permanently take away her ability to bend. Wow. So we already know at this point that the villain slash antagonist, and let me just say this, it's not altogether clear that Amon is a villain just yet. So I'll just qualify, say, he's an antagonist. So at this point in the series, we already know, it's almost certain that Amon is stronger than Korra, and that if they locked horns at this point, Amon would probably beat Korra's ass. Woof. So, I mean, that's a crazy subtext that's coming out of this episode right now. Just crazy. Amon has the ability to permanently take away somebody else's bending powers. Whew. All right, so now let me get into my analysis of Amon and his position within the series, and my speculations and predictions about whether or not he can energy bend. So a lot of you people have been, talking about Amon, and in particular, you've been saying that it looks like he has the ability to energy bend. And even if you go on, the Legend of Korra wiki page and you type in Amon, it will say that, he's a chi blocker, and also he has the ability to energy bend, but that's not quite clear to me. First of all, if you look at, and a lot of you have been looking towards the, the promo trailer for The Legend of Korra, where he does that sort of lightning thing as evidence that he's bending. And first of all, that's not energy bending. That electricity or lightning thing that's coming out of his hand, first of all, that's not energy bending. We've never seen energy bending look like that. In fact, when we have seen energy bending, it doesn't look like that at all. Second of all, it looks like the lightning that firebenders can use. But I don't think that's lightning, because if you remember in this episode, the Equalists use these like batons. They look like billy clubs or some kind of batons, and those batons produce electricity. Now go back, and that electricity looks almost exactly like the lightning of firebenders. Now go back and rewatch that trailer. The trailer, I believe, is like 1 minute and 1 second long. If you skip to like the 27-second mark, the scene will come up. Yes, I know I'm a nerd for memorizing that, but I had to go back and rewatch it so I can do this episode review. But anyway, if you rewatch that trailer, Amon puts his hand out like this, and in the middle of his hand there's a circle, and that circle is what produces the electricity. He's not bending. It looks like he's using the same technology that the Equalists use with their batons, except he's not using the batons. He has a circle in his hand that can produce the electricity. So go back and rewatch rewatched that. In that clip, I don't think that Amon is energy bending, and I don't think he's doing any other type of bending. It looks like that circle in the middle of his hand is what's producing that electricity. But on top of that, I would say that, Amon is he's being presented to us as a figure who's the head of a faction who is expressly against bending. So it doesn't even make sense that Amon would be bending to begin with, and it would be incredibly stupid for them to, position for the writers or the producers or the marketers of the Legend of Korra to give us the information that Amon is, against bending, but then show a trailer of him bending. That would just be retarded. It would reveal a major plot point through a trailer, which is, highly suspect. And on top of that, it would be a serious marketing mistake to position a person as being against bending, but show a trailer of them bending. Really, really awkward, and it would be a serious marketing mistake, which is, further evidence for my belief that what that is in that trailer is him producing the electricity, that, seems to be what the other equalists are doing with those batons, rather than him bending. So I don't think he's bending at all. So the question becomes this, though. He does, even if that what we're shown in the trailer, even if that's not Amon bending, the question still remains, because he can take away somebody else's ability to bend permanently. Is he energy bending? And it looks like he's energy bending, but I will say this as a slight qualification. We don't know if he's energy bending. We just have no idea of, if he's energy bending. Now, it looks like he's energy bending because he can take away somebody's ability to bend, but it's not entirely clear that he is in fact energy bending. And here's why I say that. We already know that the equalists can block a person's flow of chi, so that they can temporarily take away someone's ability to bend. But we also know that they're not energy benders. So we have to ask the question, is Amon's ability to permanently take away someone's ability to bend, is that just an extension of that chi blocking technique, which we know is not energy bending? So it could be that he's energy bending, or it could be that he's just developed a technique that's an extension of the chi blocking technique that all of the other, equalist minions use. So he could be energy bending, or he could be using an entirely different technique. That's why I'm not really willing to commit myself to saying that Amon can in fact energy bend. So here's how it appears to people who are watching The Legend of Korra. One, a mind can take away someone's ability to bend. Two, we know that energy bending can take away someone's ability to bend. So the natural conclusion would be that a mind can energy bend, but like I said, it's not entirely clear if that's the case. Also, um, we already, like I said before, we already know that he's against bending in general. So it would be somewhat of a contradiction in Amon's ideology if he actually was energy bending, but I don't think that's too much of a significant problem, and here's why. First, it's not clear that he's energy bending, like I just stated. And second of all, maybe he has some, he's a secret bender, or he has some ulterior motives. And some of you have already started to point this out. For example, you say things like, well, it could be the case that he wants to take out all the other benders in the world so that he can be, the most powerful person in the world. And so that might be the case. Or three, there's another possibility, which is that he really can energy bend. But if you think about it from Amon's perspective, if he's really against benders and he really doesn't like benders and he thinks that, they're oppressive to the average person, then it would seem like from his perspective, it would be an acceptable trade-off to remove the ability to bend from the world, so that, he can get rid of benders. I mean, that seems, from his standpoint, if I'm imagining that I'm Amon and I'm looking at this from his perspective, then it might be that contradiction might be an acceptable trade-off. The contradiction of him energy bending so he can take away everyone else's ability to bend. So from his perspective, it might not be a contradiction. It might be, a cost-benefit analysis, and he might think that it's an acceptable trade-off. That sort of, slight contradiction in his ideology. But overall, let me just say this. I really, really, really like Amon. Amon is turning out to be a pretty good character. And like I said before, it's not altogether clear to me that Amon is actually a villain. It's certain that he's an antagonist. He's definitely set up as the antagonist of this series, but it's not in any way clear at this point in time that he is a villain. And the reason why I say that is he hasn't done anything explicitly evil. In fact, the opposite can be said. I mean, he's actually playing the role of the vigilante if you think about it, because he actually attacked the hideout or the headquarters of the triple threat triads, presented them, at his headquarters in front of a huge rally, talked about how they were oppressing people, talked about how they were, bad people, and then he took away their ability to bend. So from where I'm sitting at this point in time, he's not a villain at all. He's not evil at all. He's kind of got the Punisher role. He's like the Punisher without death. He's really taken up the vigilante role, which is, a very, very interesting move on the part of the writers to not have someone who's explicitly a villain, but is rather an antagonist who seems to also be ethical, who also seems to have some ethical traits of a hero. So that's pretty good writing on the part of the people who produced or were involved in creating Amon as a character. Now, I will say this. It could be some point in time later on in the series where Amon really reveals himself to be a villain, but at this point, he's just an antagonist and he's not a villain. On top of that, there's a sort of added layer of complexity to this because Amon may also be a justifiable antagonist, or if he ever becomes a villain, a justifiable villain. And here's why. Now when Korra and Mako get to the hideout and um, Amon is at the head of this huge rally of people. He tells them this story about when he was younger, a firebender, I believe it was a firebender, killed his parents, scarred his face, and that's why he started along this path of this ideology of being against benders. Now, if that story is true, and I hope it is true because it would add another layer of complexity to Amon's character, then that would mean that he's not just an antagonist or not just a villain and not just a vigilante, but he'd also be a justifiable villain, which would be very, very interesting. It would certainly complicate his character, and it would be a little bit of a difference between The Legend of Korra and Avatar: The Last Airbender, because the villain in this case wouldn't be, the ethics in this case wouldn't be so black and white. It wouldn't just be, Amon's a villain and that's it. Because if you remember Fire Lord Ozai, there was nothing sympathetic about him. But if this story that Amon tells turns out to be, have some truth to it, then, Amon would immediately be set up as a sympathetic character, and it wouldn't just be, straightforward black and white. And also, I think it would be a good thing if, this was true, because it would bring the ethical and political clash to the forefront of the series. It would position Amon as not just, some overly evil person who's just some brute. It would actually turn him into an antagonist, or even if he becomes a villain who has the qualities or the characteristics of a political philosopher. Because what Amon is doing is she's trying to start a political movement. And so to position a villain or an antagonist of this series as a political philosopher would be a very interesting move on the part of the writers. And he actually comes right out and says this. He says, people like to say that, the avatar, brings balance to the world, and that bending brings balance to the world, but they're wrong. Bending has been the cause of every major war in the history of the world. And I was like, wow. I mean, now we get to see that Amon is actually a very intelligent political thinker. And that, again, he's not just some, the average, brute. And that also raises a question about precisely why it is that there were so many people who came to that meeting that Amon held at his headquarters. I mean, because when they did that panoramic scene, it was a huge, It looked like thousands and thousands of people came to watch Amon speak, and it was just absolutely amazing. I mean, and you have to ask yourself this question: if Amon really doesn't have, any foundation for his thinking, then why is it that so many people showed up to watch him speak? I mean, it really starts to force you to question the ethics of the Avatar world and why it is that people believe that benders are so oppressive. And it's also interesting to think about Amon in this aspect as well. Amon is the perfect antithesis to the Avatar. He's the perfect nemesis because if you paid attention to the way Amon spoke about himself, it's very clear that he has a messiah complex. He talked about how the spirits were talking to him and how they told him that he was justified in taking bending away from the world, so and how that would create the real balance. So if he was positioning himself as a sort of messianic figure in the Avatar world, then he's the perfect antithesis, the perfect nemesis of the Avatar, because the Avatar is like the Jesus Christ figure of the Avatar world. I mean, they're the huge spiritual leader of that world, and so the Amon's, Messiah complex juxtaposed with, Korra as the spiritual leader of the Avatar world is a very, very interesting contrast between Amon and Korra. And also, it's also very interesting to think about the the political position that Amon plays in this series, as opposed to the political position that Ozai played in the last Avatar: The Last Airbender series. Ozai was a political figure who was on the top of, for all intents and purposes, he was on the top of the Avatar world. He positioned himself as the emperor, as someone who, was all powerful as a political and as a military leader in the Avatar world. But Amon is precisely the opposite of that. He's someone on the bottom or even outside of the political structure because he's a radical, he's a revolutionary. And what's also interesting about this difference between Amon and Ozai is that because of, Amon's political position as being, outside the political power structure, that it's clear to me that Amon can't possibly believe that he can take over the entire world. I mean, he has no army. I mean, he has, some minions, but it's not at all clear that he would be able to take on and defeat all the five nations of the Avatar world. That's not clear at all. So it's possible, and I would say probable, that Amon is directly connected to the inner workings of the politics of the Avatar world, and he's probably working with some people on the inside to bring the sort of political structures of the Avatar world crumbling down, because Amon is not seriously a threat to everybody, every bender in the Avatar world. That's ridiculous. There have to be, uh, an extraordinary number of benders who are, masters in their own right, who could probably, beat Amon in a fight. Or if they couldn't, they could create some sort of alliance and go after him. So it's not at all clear that Amon poses any significant threat to the Avatar world at this point in time. Also, one last thing before I finish this review, which by now is 23 minutes long, quite long, but I just had this episode was just too important to the series, and the introduction of Amon was just too important, so I just had to analyze him, even at the expense of, doing this long ass video. There's some speculation among the fans that Amon might be Bumi. Bumi is one of the three children of Aang and Katara, and um, 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 it's been revealed that Bumi was the one of the three children who couldn't bend, and so because Bumi couldn't bend, maybe that may have been the reason why he, hates benders, or he might be jealous of them. So there's some speculation, and it seems to me a little bit. It's kind of scant, but a little bit of, evidence that Bumi might be Amon. But I think this theory probably fails for two reasons. First of all, Bumi's father is Aang. I mean, the Avatar, one of the most, I mean, not even one of the most, probably the most spiritually aware person in the entire Avatar world. So it would be rather ironic if, Amon turns out to be an energy bender, if he was Bumi. It would be incredibly ironic if Bumi had the ability to energy bend, but Aang, as the Avatar and as the most spiritually aware person in the Avatar world, didn't know that his son could energy bend. That would be very, very ironic and very, very weird. And on top of that, so at best it would be ironic. At worst, it would strain narrative plausibility, because the idea that Aang wouldn't know that his own son could energy bend would be extremely, extremely weird. And like I said, it would just strain narrative plausibility. So this was your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga. Just brought you another video with no frills, just the analysis, and can't wait for the next episode of The Legend of Korra. Peace and have a blessed day.